Travis, I'm going to start if we're recording.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today on the August 22nd KRT board meeting. First thing I'd like to do is make sure we have a quorum, and Sean can do a roll call and then let us know if anybody's online.
Yep. So looking across the room, I see that we have Mr. Goldman, Ms. Gaynor, Mr. Snodgrass, and Mr. Farmer representing Kanawha County, and Mr. Tolliver representing the City of Charleston. I believe Heidi Adams is on electronically. We have Mark Doty representing Bell, and Larry Bailey has joined us electronically.
Yes.
And we have Mr. Anderson representing Montgomery, and Mr. Sutphin representing St. Albans. Therefore, we have 6 of our 8 partners present and a quorum.
Great, thank you all for your attendance. The first thing is to approve the minutes from the July 25th board meeting. Those were sent out electronically, unless somebody requested they be sent by mail. And speaking to that, everything's going to be sent electronically unless you specifically ask that it be sent by mail from here on out. So hopefully that's not a burden. If it is, there's a way to do it the way we have in the past, and you're welcome to request that. But as far as the minutes go, has everybody had a chance to take a look at those? Are there any comments or revisions or changes?
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Okay, motion by Snodgrass and a second to approve the minutes from the prior board meeting. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Next we'll have Jessica present the financial statements.
Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Starting on Schedule 2, that's our statement of revenues and expenses. You'll see our operating expenses exceeded our operating revenues by just under $1 million, which is pretty standard for month to month. Revenues exceeded budget by about $52,000, but the majority of that is due to the overall conservative estimate on the return on investments for this year. We fully expect the rates to drop over the course of this year, so I think the cumulative revenues over the year will level out. But in the meantime, we'll take the returns as we can. Operating expenses are currently under budget by $83,000, but that is largely due to materials and supplies being lower than usual for this month. Under non-operating income, levy receipts appear to be significantly under budget at $98,000 versus $725,000, but that's because the budget is broken up evenly over 12 months and levy receipts kind of vary. July is typically a lower payout month. More on that when we get to Schedule 6, but before we move to that, if you look at the very bottom on the net line, net income and loss, our total bottom line for this month was $21 lower than this time last year, and I thought that was a pretty impressive consistency of year over year. 21 whole dollars, folks. I love it. But if you flip to Schedule 6, you'll see the levy receipts for July were 23% lower than last year, but they rebounded in August and bring us to nearly 15% increase year over year. Total through August is just over $589,000 versus $513,000 last year.
So with 1 month in the year, it's hard to analyze a lot about what's going on because a lot of these payments are spread out evenly over the year. So as we get through the year, we'll have a little bit more detail to look at, but appreciate the presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Jessica on the financial statements? If there aren't any questions, those will be attached to the meeting minutes for future reference. We'll move on to item 5.
Yes, so this is invoices in excess of $5,000. Last month we spoke briefly concerning an invoice we received from the Kanawha County Emergency Ambulance Authority for $135,000, and I believe we have some representatives from the Ambulance Authority here today, but we can dig deeper into this invoice and let the board discuss.
Okay, so we talked about it briefly last month, which was about a provision during the prior levy term that the KRT agreed to buy an ambulance every year for the ambulance authority. That was a negotiated agreement that was made. This goes back to what year? 2022?
Yes. That agreement expired in 2023, correct?
Okay. So Monica is here. Did you all want to speak to this about the timing of the invoice and the agreement and things like that?
Yes, we can definitely speak on that. So we have, typically what happens is when we receive an ambulance in to our line, that is going to be we invoice KRT. So that we've had 6 is what the total number was, and that last invoice in June of 2024 was for the sixth one for a total of $135,000.
Okay, so but that was outside the time frame of the agreement. That's where I think the miscommunication is, or
Okay.
at least what we're trying to figure out
Okay.
about the request.
Okay. Outside in terms of what dating?
Well, so the memorandum of agreement says that the agreement expires June 30th, 2023. It also says that KRT shall not be obligated to make any funds not requested by KCEA in any given fiscal year available in any future year. So I think it goes back to, there was 1 year during that 6-year span of getting ambulances, that it was 2022, correct? That we were not invoiced
Yes.
by the ambulance authority
Yes.
for. So the reason why we have to talk about in front of the board is the agreement says that it must be invoiced during that fiscal year for us to pay it. And when we've lapsed that fiscal year, because in 2023 you did invoice us for an ambulance. And I believe in our discussions there were some talks that maybe in 2022 you all had some tough time getting an ambulance.
Difficulty in getting ambulances, some of them over 500 days. We recently, the last ambulances that we just got in June, and when we invoiced you all, we had to go to legal for a compliance review of our bid for ambulances as well as to our board. We back and forth, and Tracy can speak to that, for quite some time with our vendor or ambulance manufacturer, and trying to get the ambulances that we had ordered several years ago be able to get them to deliver them. There was issues, just kept kicking the can down the road as far as the ambulances. There was issues with chips, there was issues with plates on the front of the ambulance. So we finally came to them, it's like, hey, this was early May, you guys have got to give us a decision. They came to Tracy and said, you may be able to get your ambulances in July. Then they came back and said, no, it may be September, October. And they just kept extending that deadline. And we went to our board and we was like, we need these ambulances in on our line immediately. So what we did was had a meeting with our vendor, and we told them, you got to fix something. At that point in time, they gave an option. They had some additional ambulances on the line that was not on our bid, that they could basically deliver the next day. So we went to legal, we had a compliance review, and we took it to our board, and the decision was made to go ahead and purchase those ambulances and kind of hop off our bid due to the emergency need of getting those ambulances in stock. So that's what precipitated sending that June 24th invoice to KRT.
Those have been on order for 700 days, over 700 days.
Okay.
Got a question.
Yeah.
So we were obligated basically to give them 6 ambulances
Correct.
but we only gave them 5.
Correct, yes. Yes,
And,
this isn't a.
and it's just the issue is the invoice was outside the parameters of our contract.
The time
That's
frame.
the time frame.
Yes, sir.
Does legal have any advice on what?
I don't know that our legal counsel has looked into this at all. She's shaking her head that she hasn't, so.
There's Grace.
But, yeah, she's here,
Yeah, I mean,
she's switched into the table,
yeah.
but, I think that, for sure, the board would have to take action to do this, because it falls outside of that agreement, which was approved by the board in 2018, or whatever, 2017. That's why it's being brought before us. I can't remember if you were here last month or not.
I was video.
Okay, so we talked about it briefly, but without input from the ambulance authority, nobody felt like we had an ability to make a decision.
So were these ordered prior to the contract expiring? The ambulances that we've been invoiced for, or this ambulance?
Yes,
Yes.
over 700 days
Okay.
it took to get those. And we wouldn't have them now. We had, the bid called for Chevy vans, and we couldn't get them. They said, like Monica said, September, October, maybe. So we switched, after we talked to legal on our board, and went with Ford Transits, because they had those. Because there's not as much modification on a Transit as there is a Chevy van. They cut the top off of a Chevy van. They couldn't get that cap either, was one of the things they couldn't get. So instead of waiting maybe 6 more months, we got direction to make that change and go with those other ambulances.
On the last one is invoice, not counting this one, has that ambulance came in yet?
Yes,
That was.
We don't
Yes.
invoice until we take
Yeah,
delivery.
we don't get the invoice ourselves until we take delivery.
Was it in the same group of ambulances? Or?
So the one on this ambulance that was, you guys were invoiced in June, we took, our invoice was 6/11, and they were delivered to us like that next day or.
6/11 of what year? Was that of the 22?
No,
24.
24.
So did you all receive any ambulances in fiscal year 22?
I don't believe we did, but without checking into that a little deeper, I would be hesitant to say that we did or we didn't. I don't think we did, because that was, you know, at the end of COVID, and everything was backed up at that point, we couldn't get anything.
But somehow you got ambulances in fiscal year 23.
Yeah, and those have been on order for 2 years.
And again, the 23 ones we went to our board for an emergency purchase, because the ambulance vendor had called and said, hey, we know you got a bunch of ambulances on order, we had like 9 on order. And know you got a bunch on order, there's still, we have no date to give you any, that you'll be able to take delivery of them, but hey, we've got these in. We again went back to our board and emergency purchased 2, I think
Yes.
it was 2.
In 23.
In 23, and that's when we gave you all an invoice in 23.
Why didn't you make the catch-up invoice in 23?
It was 1 a year. So that's, I guess, I don't know, I'm just guessing that
I'd
they
have
thought
to
it
ask
was
the
1 a
CFO
year,
that-
yeah.
I guess my underlying question would be, is this a clerical error, or is it that you didn't receive any ambulances to invoice us for? And it doesn't sound like we know that for sure.
I'd have to go, would have to go back and double check with the CFO on that 22 question.
There are years that we don't get ambulances.
What's the normal number per year, just to keep the fleet alive and running well?
Our vehicle replacement plan says we need to replace 4 to 6 every year, but we typically don't have money to do that. So, we, you know, during this process with you guys, working with you guys on these, we would order 1 a year. Now, I think we got one, there was one that was lost, the order was lost, and that may have been the 2022 vehicle that we were supposed to receive and invoice you guys for. Cause we usually, they told us 2 years, and we'd wait about a year and start calling about it. So we started calling them about it, and they said, well, it's at least 2 years, 2 years additional to the year we already had. And, I think that may have been what got things pushed back. Cause we had ordered 1 because we knew that we had a contract with you guys to pay for 1. But without checking for sure, I would hesitate to say that for certain, but I know that happened.
Okay.
What vendor do you guys use now for?
Medics, Pin Care,
Okay.
yeah.
And do you all lease anymore? Is that, it's just all
No,
purchase now?
these are all purchases. The last few that we got, we did finance, which we haven't done that in the past, but we're starting to do that again.
Were there any communications in 2022 to KRT that there wouldn't be a billing or an invoice since the buses, or since the ambulances were not available?
I don't
Or any
know.
prior to this invoice, were there any communications about there not being a 6th one?
Not aware of. I know in 23, I know I had spoken with Sean about that invoicing of that one prior to sending the invoice.
We received this invoice the 27th this year.
And we had just taken delivery of those.
So we have a long-term relationship with ambulance authority, obviously through the safety levy and every emergency that is, you know, system-wide. KRT shows up, the ambulance authorities shows up, you know, county agencies that work together. So, we're sympathetic, obviously, to the fact that, you know, they have needs just like we do, but this falls outside of the original agreement, so the board needs to make some decision about what to do.
My thought is, you know, we guaranteed them 6 ambulances, and we only gave them 5. I think we probably should go ahead with 6. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
I have concerns because we're operating at a deficit already, and this is not budgeted for, in our budget this year. So that's my concern. I mean, it's not something that we anticipated.
That's the question, where you gonna get the money from? You didn't budget for it, and I agree with you. If we agreed to give them 6 and we were whatever, and we're 1 short, we owe it, where we gonna get the money?
Well, it would come out of our capital reserves is a short answer, but I can tell you that later on in the agenda, we've got a roofing issue that we need to deal with. It's about the same amount of money that we didn't budget for. It was a wind damage with an insurance claim and a shortfall to really make the repair correctly. So that's coming up on the agenda as well.
We still don't have a confirmation about any ambulances in 2022 being delivered. I guess that is another question that's clarifying. We said right now, we don't believe
I
so,
don't
but we
have
still
that.
need to check.
I mean, my suggestion would be, I think, and I agree, I mean, if you all had ordered 6 ambulances during the course of the contract, and, we were obligated to pay, I mean, I would agree that we should pay, but I've not reviewed the contract. I don't know, I mean, I don't know under the terms of the contract whether or not, I just have concerns doing it with us being at a deficit. I kind of like the answer to, did you get an ambulance in 2022, that could have been invoiced to us? That's my opinion.
So that's something you all could fact check, I presume.
Okay.
So we could take action subject to their verification. We could table it till next month. We could,
Can we have the information by next month? If
Yeah,
there was a
absolutely.
2022?
Yes.
So that's the suggestion, is that we table this topic for our next board meeting, let them determine if they had a bus that was delivered in 22, for whatever reason didn't get invoiced, or maybe they didn't get one in 2022, but we'll find that out for sure, at least as a missing piece of information. Is there anything else anybody thinks that they need clarification on? So if they answer that question, we can wrap it all up next meeting.
My only question is legal, since it is outside the parameters, if that's going to, if we're allowed to override that.
We can take a look.
So you'll take a look and
Yeah.
work with Sean and make sure that
Yeah,
if
we'll
we,
take
okay. Okay, but nothing for the ambulance authority to investigate.
Appreciate what all they do.
Yeah.
All the hard work.
Okay, we'll get to the bottom of it. Appreciate your all's
Thank you. We
attendance
appreciate you.
and your information on that.
Thank you, have a good day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so, 6 is old business on the insurance report. Kurt?
Good morning, everyone. In your package to the insurance report, we had 2 new claims over the last month. One was a parked car that we hit, and the other was a hard break. As far as workers' comp, we did have another claim this month, and we're working to get the person back to work. So, that's the insurance report.
All these are active? It seems
Yes.
like this list is growing.
It is. So our insurance, so that whole list, there's portions of some of these claims closed, but some of them are still open. So there are things that have,
You mean like maybe multiple people and one innocent had a claim?
yes, or we were able to close this one, but this person had an attorney, and now we're working through their demands. So, correct, all of those are open.
Okay. And you just are sitting back monitoring this. You don't have to spend a lot of time on these. Do you?
So, after we do the initial claim, not much unless we get a lawsuit. And then we have to go and grab the individual that was involved at here and
Depositions and all.
depositions and all of those types of things. But generally, it's just I usually get an email or 2 a day from West Virginia Corp updating on some claim.
Mm-hmm.
So when the new insurance kicked over, on the old claims, they didn't absorb those. Is it still
Correct.
Brim that has the old claims?
Yes, and Brim has, I think, 2 claims still that we're working on. One was May 20th of 2022, and one was July 5th of 2022. After those dates, it's all West Virginia Corp. So they've only got 2 claims working through.
And the bus that hit a parked car, can you give any specifics on that?
It was on Beach Avenue in a very tight area. So the car was just parked and our drivers just scraped up against it. No injuries on the bus.
I think Jacob reported last month that there was a bike rack that was extended on the front. Maybe that influenced them. Is that, am I right about that?
That's a different one.
Oh.
So the bike rack one was June 11th. So, again, like I said, portions of these are closed. Some of them are still open, so we're just working through them.
Okay. All right, we'll have Jacob talk about CAT operations.
So in operations report 1, we had a total ridership of just over 93,000, which was a 4% increase from the year before. And then at the bottom of the receipts box, for the sewer program, we received 139,000 from July. And over on the far right, under the transit app, we had 8,700 rides used through the transit app, with 133,000, almost 134,000 sessions. And the sessions are the number of times people open the app and use it to plan their trip, or use it to pay their fare.
So how does that compare to, since we don't have the.
Yeah, so the highest last fiscal year in the session was 121,000.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's
Everything
increasing every month.
is trending up. The highest number of rides last fiscal year was 7,700, so about 1,000 more rides there. So it's being received positively from the passengers. In operations report 2, the day pass there, we sold 2,400 day passes with the mobile ticketing. We had 965 full fare rides there with Miscellany. Total revenue was roughly 75,000, a little more than 75,000 there for the month of July. And then down the bottom, the ridership programs, under operation and transportation, it stayed pretty steady with 1,500 rides. That's off the operations report, unless there's any questions.
Do we have any questions for Jacob?
I just had a comment on this CAT program. I have a neighbor that's using this in Dallas 3 times a week. And it's a really, really good program. It's really helped out. They're not able to drive. His wife's elderly, so it's been a blessing to them, and I'm sure most of the people that utilize that service.
Yeah, they may not have great alternatives to this. Okay, COA.
So we had a COA committee meeting earlier this month, on the 13th of this month. I appreciate the members of that committee coming together to talk a little bit more in depth about the 3 different options that have been put in front of the board. Again, for your all's memory, it's that COA option 1, which is literally the direct from Kinley Horn suggestion that we replace the 11 routes with the KRT on demand zones. Then option 2 was to take those 11 routes and essentially take the frequency in half and also eliminate Sunday service, which would save us about $2.5 million a year. Then option 3 was essentially the same as option 2, but keep Sunday service. Okay. So that's the $1.9 million in savings. So the committee met. I don't think a formal recommendation.
No, I'll kind of take it from there. I want to point out Michael, Valerie, Heidi, and Mark were there, and thank you all very much. Brett was there, so we got input from the drivers union. Had a very hour-and-a-half, very insightful meeting because it allowed us in advance to ask questions that Jacob answered and had the answers to when we met, and it put us in a position to really kind of dig into some of the details a little bit better. There was no conclusion, well, I shouldn't say that. There was no decision made, but there were some suggestions that we're looking to follow through on. I think we're down to 2 and 3. The difference being whether there's Sunday service or there's not Sunday service. The committee needs to meet again before the next board meeting, and the committee's suggesting that there be a public information session once the committee makes a suggestion about what we'd like the board to approve, that the staff would have a public information session to make that information available to the public, either at the library or here, and that way folks that are still concerned about how it influences them would have an opportunity to be here to hear what it is that the board plans to vote on. So that was a conclusion of the committee, was to have that public information session so that we can make that information available. Because of the timing, and Jacob was trying to work toward a markup. This has gotten, which is a little bit of an artificial deadline, but that's gotten pushed back to take some of the pressure off so that this can be done at a slightly relaxed pace. But I do anticipate that at the September meeting that the committee will have a suggestion we're gonna expect everybody to make a decision on. With the Sunday service being one of the primary differences in the two options, I am curious at this point if any of the board members have any strong feelings about the Sunday service or not, because the committee is gonna be discussing that in particular.
What is the price difference? What are we saving by eliminating the Sunday service?
The Sunday service costs us about $510,000.
Per year?
Per year.
Um,
There's 880 average passengers is what I had written down.
On Sundays?
Mhm.
That's trips.
That's trips, okay,
Yeah, so
sorry.
it's- Trips, you're looking at 300-400 people.
My concern about Sunday is, our healthcare system, you know, nurses, people that work in hospitals, staff, if they use that service, you know, if that doesn't close, it goes continuous. Is there, if we did eliminate that, could that go to, on-demand for maybe the Sunday only, or is that?
The KRT Plus will only operate days that the mainline service is operating, because that's the primary function of that on-demand service is to get people to the main bus route lines.
I see.
And so the way the zones are set up with the KRT Plus, that if I'm in Marmet and I need to go to General, I wouldn't be in that zone anyway.
On demand?
Correct. Yeah, so if I lived in Marmet and and I could get on a KRT Plus, it would take me to a main line, and then I could go and get within the system and go where I needed to go. But it was the KRT Plus is not suited to work outside of the operational hours of the main line.
Just my opinion, that's my only biggest concern about leaving the Sunday off is, you know, whether our hospitals, and, you know, things that really need to be, you know, post office, whatever, you know, ridership, if that's, you know, it could be a detriment. That's my only concern about the Sunday.
And we've heard from public comment that there are people that lack of Sunday service is gonna influence, there's no doubt. Is that something that you can give us feedback on at the next committee meeting about people that are boarding and riding to and from medical centers?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like Sunday service just because if you're going to provide transportation, not that can't do it 100% of the time, but you need to do it on Sundays. That's the only time some people get to visit or whatever. The only time they might ride the bus if they're not making a living or spending money. That might be their free time.
Mm-hmm.
And they deserve a right to go somewhere, whatever. And a lot of people work on Sunday. I just think you ought to have transportation 7 days a week, if you can.
Okay. That's valuable information. Any other board members that have input on Sunday service?
The same echoing that, the persons I've talked to in the community who do ride the bus, they say some version, even if it's reduced, will help out tremendously.
Okay. Heidi's online, isn't she?
Yep.
Any comments from you, Heidi, since you were at the committee meeting?
I'd be pulling a fast one on you.
Yeah.
Did the drivers have any comments on the Sunday, on what they?
Brett, I'll just let you speak to it if you'd like to, since.
I mean, Sunday service, you know, I've worked it for 3.5 years on the extra board. I know what it's like. Most of the drivers would like to have Sunday off. I ain't gonna lie about it, but we're here for passengers. But you know, it's your own call, so.
It still will be reduced, right? It's still.
It would be random current service levels as is today on Sunday, if we kept Sunday service under option 3.
The Sunday service different than the other days?
Yeah, it's every 2 hours, and there's one bus per route that runs every 2 hours.
So you'd still keep it at 2 hours, it would not be every 4 hours then?
Right.
But the other ones are gonna be reduced, if it's an hour, it'd be reduced to 2 hours? I'm not following it right.
Well, it's option 2 is no Sunday service, and option 3 would remain same as today, which is, there's a bus on every route that runs every 2 hours, just one bus. So we couldn't do every 4 hours. You would then have a 2-hour gap of just the bus sitting.
So what's the service? What is it?
Every 2 hours. One bus on a route every 2 hours.
Okay, then what are we changing is it Sunday only, is this question? On the
It's
number
the only,
three?
it's the only difference between 2 and 3, but both 2 and 3 also anticipate those 11 routes, the frequency being halved during the week.
That's what I'm
Yes,
asking,
yes,
the
yes.
change.
Yes, and that's the same on 2 and 3, so yes. So option 3, if you keep Sunday service, you are still taking the frequency of those 11 routes in half during the weekdays. That's where you get the savings of $1.9 million. The only difference is between option 2 and 3 is the Sunday, which is that $500,000 difference, and the difference for input we've got from employees on morale and attracting talent here. If we can say, hey, you get Sundays off,
And when we talked, it takes like 25 people to run Sunday service, like here or in Rolling Assets doing all that, which surprised me. It's not just, a handful of drivers, because you've got multiple dispatchers, multiple supervisors, mechanics and cleaners, and all the support staff. I've talked to 2 drivers, and they have been here for 4 and 5 years and cannot get off of the Sunday driving route yet, because they just haven't gotten to the point in the seniority system that they can't have Sundays off.
It took me 4 years.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing from other people, is that the drivers, so recruitment, if they know they're gonna work Sundays for some unknown amount of time, I would assume it's kinda tough.
Do they get extra, overtime for working Sundays?
No, it's regular.
Just regular days?
Throughout the week.
Unless somebody has to be called in, if somebody's on vacation.
If somebody works a day off, it's
Yeah.
automatic at the time.
Right.
If you work a Sunday, do you have the same days off during the week, same drop days?
If you're normally off, you're just more or less like, if you're off on Sunday and Friday, and you come in and work your day off on Sunday, you just get Friday
So the
off.
schedule usually never
Nah.
changes?
Travis, did you have a comment?
Heidi, she said her mic wasn't working, but she said that her only comment is that we have to weigh the cost versus the benefit. Some people will be inconvenienced no matter what option we take, but we need to save money in one way or another.
Okay.
And another thing on that, the math there of the Sunday service, and Jacob can look into where people get on and off as far as medical appointments, and I think that'll be helpful, that those 800 trips, you can't necessarily say how many people is that. You assume that if you go one way, you come home, right? So you start to divide that by 2, and you say it's 400 people, but it could be people who go and transfer again, so it could be smaller than that. But if you take that larger number for the benefit of just saying, hey, this is what it looks like, and you divide that $500,000 by those 400 people, and then divide it by the weeks of the year, you're talking about $24 per ride, per person on Sundays, is what the math works
Get
out.
an Uber for that, man.
Did we ever discuss raising the rates? Well, I know we discussed it.
We will discuss the rates again today. The fare structure is part of this COA. The portion of our revenue that's attributed to ticketing and revenue is about 6% of our budget, so it's a little over $1 million. It's not substantial. The COA recommendation was to keep the day, or to make the day passes go to $350 from $250, so it's a small bump.
Still the cap on the monthly pass.
Still the fare cap, yes, yeah.
What, $30?
It's $50.
Okay,
Yeah.
60 to
60 to 50?
Which should be a big benefit to our tried and true regular runners.
Yeah.
If they work it correctly.
And I don't think from any of the meetings that I've listened to, the public meetings, I don't think anybody, I think some even requested a fare increase. They said that they wouldn't mind even paying a little extra just to keep service.
Well, I think in the big picture, the goal was to have a small increase, but keep the service the way it exists today.
Right,
Which
yes.
is not practical.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them said anything about it, I mean, they did, but as far as the big picture, like you said.
Any further comments about Sunday service? Jacob will work on those numbers that Jay's requested. The committee will get together before the next board meeting, and the committee's requested the staff to do a public informational session that would be after our meeting, but before the board meeting, so that the public can be made aware of what the board plans to.
Correct.
Um,
Yes. And with that 30-day public legal notice requirement, that will make it that public hearing will be on Wednesday, the 25th of September.
The day before our next.
The day
board
before our
meeting.
next board meeting, yes. Yeah, get that feedback. I can send that, once we nail down a date or a time.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on. There's no action to be taken on COA, but we'll move.
Well, just if we wanna go over the fair recommendations, that's up to the board.
And vote on that today?
Yeah, so during the committee talks, we got to the portion about fair recommendations, and there's an understanding that whatever decision the board makes on fair recommendations, there's a lead time of 8 months.
Yeah.
8 months for Jacob and his team to make those changes. Travis, can you pull up the fair recommendations on the COA presentation? Just that PowerPoint we had a second ago. Yeah. So, and that's what Mark was referencing just a moment ago also. And what you see is that change from the current one-day pass being $250 to being $350. And you also see the change from the current 31-day pass being $60 to dropping down to $50. And the important thing that you see underlined over there on the right is implement fare capping for account-based passes. Fare capping is the concept that once you reach that 31-day limit, so once you pay the $50, you go to purchase another ticket, the system will allow you to purchase it, it'll be for free. That is taking into consideration that some individuals may have a tougher time dropping the $50 at the beginning of the month, but you start doing the math where they start paying $350 a day and they end up paying more than what they would have paid if they would have just hit that $50. So that's a passenger-friendly concept there. The main differences here we're talking about is the difference from one-day pass going from $250 increasing to $350 and the month pass dropping from $60 to $50. The recommendation was meant to take into account our clientele and try to be more passenger friendly to them, recognizing that fare revenue is somewhat minor portion of what we operate on. And we don't have to take action on that today. The board obviously can decide to hold off until to make entire changes. But
Is a pass just considered one way, or is that a two-way? The 350, 350.
That's all day. You
it's
can
all
run
day.
as you want.
Yeah, the 24-hour period. You can
Okay.
participate anyway. The base fare, the single tickets still remain the same at $1.50.
So I think if I remember correctly, during the committee meeting, the committee basically had said that, it was our feeling that the public was more concerned about route changes rather than the fare recommendations. We hadn't really heard a lot of negative comments regarding the fare recommendations or concerns. And I would be comfortable going ahead and voting today to implement these fare recommendation changes. I don't know where all the other board members are on it.
Just for information of our ridership for the year, just an average, what percentage usually get the monthly pass compared to a day pass? Even if it's just a rough estimate.
Last year, it's roughly 12,000 day passes. Those are rides, actually. I hate to look at information on, like the number of passes. Unless you want to know the number of rides that were used by a day, or a monthly pass.
It's 12K.
That's the rides.
A day. Okay, rides.
In a month, yeah.
Is there, I know, maybe I can send one more depth, like, do you know how many get monthly though? Like a monthly pass compared to a day pass, like
I'd have to
it's
look
like a
at
50-50 or 75?
It's,
25.
I think a day pass is roughly 80% of our
Okay.
rides
Gotcha.
in a day.
Well, if you're looking at number two, the revenue for 1 month for the day passes alone was $49,000. So out of $1.1 million of pass revenue, that's a huge amount.
I mean, day pass is majority of revenue.
That's what I
Gotcha.
think that's the question.
Currently at the $60.
Sorry.
You okay?
No, I'm sorry, I was just making a notice that it
Okay.
made minor
Yeah.
increase, so.
On the $60, currently now, is that still the same if you, it's capped at $60? Or is that just?
Well, if you pay the $60 for a 31-day pass, that just means the clock starts for 31 days. That's the cost. So if you come day 32, you'd have to either purchase a day pass or a 31-day pass.
But if you do single passes and it adds up to the 60, it could go.
Currently, yeah.
So this is better for the people that's riding.
That ride
That
religiously.
$50.
If you ride
It's a lot better.
yes, if you ride consistently, you will not have to have any anxiety over the fact that you are not putting it all up front.
Right.
You're gonna pay just as much long-term as if someone who dropped the entire $50 on day one. It's a more friendly understanding that passengers may have a tougher time lifting $50 at once versus the $1.50 or $2.50, $3.50 a day. So yes, it is a passenger-friendly concept that KRT would potentially, some of the revenue from that could go down slightly, but again, it's such a de minimis portion of what we operate on.
So Valerie, I was thinking about doing this today or next month, and I'm kind of wondering, the next public information session should be very concise, because at that point, we've got a plan, and I'm wondering if we could present the whole plan in its entirety with the fare structure at that meeting, have that, whatever comment, feedback we get, and then do it collectively at the next board meeting. Would that be?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. I mean, I don't know that there's a great benefit. We haven't had a lot of feedback on this, but I think there's been so many things discussed that people have been fixated on other things and not necessarily this. Does anybody have any other feedback on how we deal with the fare recommendations at this point? The options are that we do it today, or we wait until after the public information session and do it next board meeting.
My only concern about doing it today was the lead time and the
Forgot
implementation
about that.
time, but I don't have a problem doing a public hearing and presenting the whole plan.
Does that give you much heartburn, Jacob?
No, it's getting in queue with our vendor to make the changes is the.
We need more software apparently, because 8 months is
Oh.
ridiculous to make this kind of change.
We're not the only ones wanting
That should be
so.
this afternoon.
I wish.
Okay. That just seems.
Which software company is this that handles that part of it?
Masabi,
Okay, that's the ones that.
the validators.
Yeah.
On the buses.
So if there's no other comments on that, that will conclude the COA discussion. No action's been taken. We'll wrap it all up at the next board meeting. Then we'll get into the new business, maintenance facility upgrade.
Yes, so Travis and I will tag team this one here. This is, I sent this out in the board packets. It is the proposal from Wendell that looks at the design work for the upgrades to our pits over in the maintenance facility, and it also looks at the design work for the maintenance lighting upgrades that we've talked about. Both of these items were budgeted for in our budget this year, but this is the actual, we've gone out to Wendell and asked them to look at an actual design proposal fee. We also, at the board's request, reached out to some other of our architectural vendors and asked them, hey, does this seem in line with being necessary? Our feedback from Thrasher was they would, we didn't ask them anything about dollars, et cetera, but we just gave them the information from Wendell. We're in concurrence with Wendell that this didn't seem necessary, so we felt better actually presenting this to the board at this time, which is that request for the $110,795 to go towards the design bidding of the maintenance facility, but also the maintenance lighting upgrades is a separate $28,810. These two projects as being designed and planning would be eligible for grant funding, so that's an 80-20 split. So when you look at that total, I think 20% of that is actually what KRT would be responsible for. And again, these were all approved in the budget. This is just the actual scope for the work to start happening.
And this says it's good for 60 days, which we passed. Have you verified?
I checked yesterday, we are 64 days past the date of this, but we're on Wendell let us know those prices. The fee schedule is still valid.
Okay. So they'll send a revised contract
Yes.
They'll have the correct dates on here.
Correct.
So the administration, or they're requesting that we approve the maintenance facility upgrade, which is to deal with the pits. We can't operate on the equipment without upgrading this, and from my understanding from Chris and the maintenance staff is that they are backed up because of that.
I'll make a motion to proceed with the project, because there's nothing else you can do about it, you gotta get it taken care of.
Right, and just to be clear, this is the engineering design of the project. I wish the
Yes.
project were only under.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
We can get a grant for this,
Yeah, it can be part of our.
Sure, so in our upcoming operation grant, we, have allocated money towards the pit project. Also, in our last grant, we were able to come in under for a couple of projects, such as the roof, and we've been able to reallocate that money to go towards the, pits.
Okay, so this is not earmark money from the senators and all that, this is separate?
Yes, this is our regular formula grant that we get.
In a project of this size, the FTA, you know, they really like to see that you have an A&E service on construction. So as we're not just throwing, hey, let's replace the pits, we're actually getting engineering firms and A&E services to design this work.
As we look at these numbers, and we understood this during the budget, it is a tough thing to swallow, but we're looking at the concept of eventually, hopefully, receiving some federal funding to replace the facility entirely, but as Todd mentioned, in the meantime, you have 8 pits and 4 of them are down. It's a substantial impact. When we talk about the impact of the COA on routes, et cetera, if you don't have buses to run, it doesn't matter what routes you have on your schedule, you're going to start cutting routes. And we've had that happen where we haven't had the vehicles, whether it's for CAT or for our fixed route service, based off of being down in the garage. And it's not something that the maintenance team can really do if they literally don't have the space to do it.
So, Mr. Sutphen made a motion, is there a second? And then we'll keep discussion if there is any.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there further comments? Did you have something?
Yeah, I did have a question on that, you know, 50% of the shop is down, basically, of the pits, is that the way I understand it? Have we looked at it as using the other 4 and maybe trying to get our schedule, like a 24-hour maintenance to be able to utilize those?
We have currently 24 hours. 24/7, 365.
We are 24 hours?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's by changing that around, that's not going to do it good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? I'll speak for Chris, but yes.
Okay.
So there's a motion by Mr. Sutphen and a second to accept the engineering proposal by Wendell to design the pit repairs. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is the fuel bay roof replacement.
Yes. Travis is going to put some pictures up here. It was you want to speak towards it, Travis?
What is it?
Just the April event.
Yeah, so back in April, some of you may remember that we had a little freak tornado that came through the valley. It blew the majority of the membrane from the roof, tore a lot of the edge metal off that secures that metal or that membrane to the roof. This is all pretty much ripped, stretched since we've repaired it. We did go out for insurance money on this, which we did receive. This is another picture of that. And this is, one second, this is the section of the roof. This is after the repair. So this is after they've kind of piecemealed this back together. This section of roof is over 20 years old. And what we did whenever we went out for the insurance, we had Tri-State Roofing come in, do an estimate. They offered 2 proposals, one for repair, one for replacement. Insurance companies, well, at least our insurance company, stated that because repair was listed on their proposal, that you have to go with repair no matter the dollar amount. It's already, the repair was already 53% of the estimated replacement cost, but they wouldn't budge on that. They only wanted to stick with the repair, and you'll still have that weakened membrane. They would replace the edge metal, but another storm, you're just going to have the same issue, and that's going to eventually cause structural damage of that decking below.
What's the age of the roof that's on there?
It's over 20. I don't have an exact, but it is over 20.
Then its useful life is 20, basically.
Correct. Yep.
Is Tri-State who did the roof for this building?
No.
Okay.
They were a bidder, but they did not. Harris Brothers did that work.
Okay.
But we've had a relationship with both for years.
Yes.
haven't we? Yeah. And both are quality contractors.
Yes.
All right, again, you don't have a choice. I make a motion to repair the roof.
Well, then
Or get a lot of buckets, whichever one.
Well, I think the replace is, you mean replace the roof, right?
Yes.
Um,
The part that needs replaced, you wouldn't need replaced. The part that
Well,
needs fixed would.
this entire roof gets replaced.
This whole section.
This whole section, which is right here, the drive-through wash bay, I don't know why they call it the fuel bay, but, okay.
Talking about the white perimeter,
it's
the whole white
two-part.
perimeter.
Yeah, and here down stays the same.
Yeah. So.
But this, I mean, you can see where it's stretched here, so rubber shrinks over time, believe it or not, and it will cause the edges of the parapet wall to weaken because it's pulling that wall in as it starts to shrink. And that's why it's doing all that in these corners. Once the wind's gotten under it, it's not adhered any longer. So it's just gonna get worse next time the wind comes through. So what's the quote that you're asking us to approve?
So the estimated cost of this roof replacement would be $137,000. That's for the replacement. The repair, do you want to know about it or just go with the
Tell us that number.
The repair was $73,661.94. But this section, so it's still this roof, but this section is the only part that would be repaired. This very small sliver of this roof is the only part that would be repaired. The $137,000 would encompass this entire 6,500 square foot roof.
And the $137,000, because we've talked about this, is an estimate based on other quotes we've had, but it's not specific to this replacement project.
That's
right?
correct.
So the authorization would be to go out for an RFP.
Correct.
To get the roof replaced,
Yes.
up to $137,000.
Yeah, well, that's our rough, we wouldn't want to limit it, I don't think, to 137, but that's the estimated cost based on what we had repaired here.
Yeah, the motion today is just to ask the will of the board whether or not the repair or the replace, with the recommendation from staff that we replace the entire portion.
And then when those bids come in, there'll be a second.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to get the RFP started on there too. Well, I would have both repair and replace numbers on there.
Okay.
Is that,
I don't
does that
know.
help you?
I would pick one or the other, if it were me. We
Have we spent money to repair this
To-
in recent months?
to resecure it, yes.
Just resecure it?
Yes, it was about $4,500 just to resecure it. That's not guaranteeing any wind speeds, anything like that.
No warranty with it?
No, no. And even your repair won't have a warranty. It won't be manufacturer warranty because they want this entire roof replaced for them to say that they will have a manufacturer warranty for that. You will only have the repair and then it'll be between you and the installer, and they'll probably only re-secure that section that they repaired. So if this bottom portion was damaged within that, you wouldn't have a warranty for that.
Has anybody pulled up if there is a warranty on this existing roof from the original, from 20 years ago?
No, it's beyond its useful life. They won't do beyond 20 years typically, unless you have a much more expensive roof system. They'll do up to 25.
So, I mean, with the age of the roof and the sustained damage, I think it needs to be replaced. As much as it's not budgeted, and those aren't, just like when your hot water tank goes out.
Yeah.
I'd modify my motion to have an RFP on the whole roof.
To replace
on
that.
that section.
Okay.
I second
So, motion by Mr. Snodgrass and a second by Gaynor to get an RFP to replace the roof on the fuel bay. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then C, support vehicles.
Yeah, and so Travis also put out a RFP for
But IFB for
IFB
yeah.
for support vehicles. This was we budgeted for essentially what we estimated would be 5 support vehicles. We've since, taking into consideration some of these unexpected expenses, Jacob's been able to say that we could essentially get by with 3 support vehicles, which will shore up, which will leave some money on the funding on the table that we can now reallocate towards some of these expenses we talked about, the roof repair, et cetera. But Travis, you want to talk towards what we received?
So unfortunately, we only received one bid from dealerships. So what we did was solicited dealerships in the area for vehicles. We were fairly specific on what we were looking for. FTA right now is allowing a waiver on Buy America, so you can buy minivans and SUVs. Essentially, are the two vehicles. We were looking for minivans with that intention, but we also could get by with SUVs. We received a bid from Moses Ford. A lot of dealerships, from feedback that I received from them, they didn't want to fool with it. They saw the contract clauses that they would have to adhere to, and they just, I don't want to touch it. Some were confused, and I can't really get too deep in with them to kind of handwrite their proposal for them. Essentially, they just wanted to send you, hey, this is the MSRP. It is what it is. Which is fine, but I need all of that contract signed and dated, and I got a lot of pushback from that. But anyway, Moses sent us a proposal. Roughly, it was a Ford Escape, Ford Explorer, and it was just those 2 vehicles. One was a hybrid, one was just a gasoline vehicle. The Escape was roughly $36,000, and then the Explorers were roughly $46,000. So those are the vehicle prices in their bid.
Really
So support vehicles can be used in several different ways, whether it's, historically, we've used them as supervisor vehicles. We also use them as relief vehicles, so when someone starts their shift down at the city center, they can take that vehicle there and vice versa. So there's a myriad of different ways they can be used. We also have talked potentially in the future, some of those vehicles, with the implementation of KRT Plus, as long as you have a tablet in there, you can actually run that to go pick up people if we were in a situation where we needed an extra vehicle to pick up a couple of people. But essentially, it's moving staff back and forth.
And it's for 5.
We had budgeted for 5, what we thought would average out. We assumed that the estimate would come back around 40,000, so we budgeted for 5 of those. Again, since then, we've reassessed with Jacob and his operations team. 3 will get us across that finish line of our current needs are. Again, which will open up another $80,000 so we can shift towards the roof. Correct. Yes.
The lower amount vehicles, are those hybrid, or is it?
The 36, the Escape, yes. They had a non-hybrid, which was around 33, 34.
Hybrid meaning diesel gas?
It was electric gas.
Electric gas. So for fuel efficiency, I mean, that's what, in our minds, the hybrid vehicles, if they're driving back all day, I would prefer that, just to save on the fuel. It just makes sense to me. And again, this is all budget. We just want to make you all aware that this is happening. It's the big difference between when we used to go off the state contract and we bought Ford Explorers 3 years ago for $30,000. Now that the state doesn't have an existing contract, it's making it tougher for individuals or agencies like ours to purchase these vehicles as efficiently or economically as we did in the past.
So no action needs to be taken on this particular
No,
item?
this is just an update. We wanted to let you know that we went out and we received 1 response.
And the original bid date, we extended that because we did not have a lot of, we didn't get any responses on the
Was
first.
Stevens interested? They had a state contract for years.
No.
No? Okay.
I sent it to them
The
via
states
email.
On SUVs and trucks and stuff, they're not doing that.
During COVID, the state fleet purchasing, where it was the same issue maybe of what Monica and what we experienced with not being able to get vehicles, they essentially put a moratorium on their state contracts for fleets. And if you go to their website, it's the preeminent thing on the purchasing page. There's not currently a state contract for any vehicles. And that's what's tough, is because historically we were able to go to that list and say, hey, I want a Ford Explorer and I want 2 of them for $32,000, and we had them 3 months later last time. Whereas this time we have to put out the specs and say, how much will this cost? And then hope somebody responds.
Yeah.
And thankfully, at least one did. If not, I don't know what our answer would have been.
And I think from what I've heard from a lot of dealers is whenever they sell vehicles like this, they have to kick it to their fleet, and they don't really get if I go to the lot right now and purchase a vehicle, they don't get that incentive. It all goes to Ford. It doesn't actually go through the dealership.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why a lot of them want to avoid it. And Stevens was usually the middleman with Ford Motor Company. They would send the vehicles to Stevens as a hub, and then they would deliver or send it to them.
And you'll brand these, they'll look just like our other vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nothing else on vehicles?
No.
Okay, we're now to the public comment session, which we're just almost exactly on time. We have one person that has signed up, Betty Rivard. Betty, would you like to address the meeting? And if you don't mind, to do it close to a microphone, either here or there, so that people online can hear you. And we'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to make 5 points. I'm here as a rider and an advocate for other riders. I agree with your slowing down, so thank you for doing that in terms of your planning for the changes you're making. Cutting Sunday service is major for those affected. One person testified at the last public hearing she wouldn't be able to see her grandchildren. It would affect me going to church. Those are major activities that happen on Sundays for people. We need a public hearing, not just a public information session, and I agree with addressing fares as part of that. I want to urge you again to think beyond the current budget to community involvement in finding more funds. This is public service. Community, I believe, from the feedback I've had, will support more money for KRT if there's an understanding of where that's going and how it's going to help people. I'm going to continue to advocate to keep the trolley route the same. I think my op-ed in the Charleston Gazette Mail was supposed to be shared with you all, where I pointed out the issues related to that. And I also just want to point out that based on what I heard at the last meeting, the cost for me to get to my dentist in South Hills is going to double with the on-demand system. And that's major because I have a half fare, $79 and half Medicare. But I just pay 75 cents twice to get there. It'll be in a different zone from the East End, so my understanding is it'll go up to $3 to $5. So I just want to point that out, if I'm understanding it correctly. It's not my interest at all. So, thank you.
Thank you, Betty. If there's anything else from the board, this is your chance, otherwise we'll be adjourned. Appreciate everybody's attendance today, and have a great